as you mentioned. You got Carolina at home. Then you go down to Nashville, come home quick for Arizona, then you go down to Dallas, then you come home for Tampa Bay.
This is strange.
10 possible points. I'm putting the over-under at 5.5 points. I want you to give me your over or under and the reasons for your pick, and then we'll move on to college.
I think 5.5 is the over-under. I'm going to take the over because I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win both games at home. I don't, I think Arizona, they win in regulation. Carolina, I don't know.
3 games at home, though, right? Carolina, Arizona.
The first 2, I meant. Sorry,
okay.
The first 2 games, yep. Carolina, Arizona are wins for me. That's 4 points. Now you've got to find a way to get 2 points to cover this anyway.
Yep.
Find a way to get 2 points between Nashville, Dallas, and Tampa. I think they find a way to do that. I'll put it on 6 points. 6.
It's a good number.
I think 6. And if you can come out, 2-1 and 2, or, if you can come out of this stretch, getting a couple of these games to overtime, especially some of these tough divisional games, it doesn't look great in terms of when you look in the standings, but this is a meaty little stretch, and then you get a little time off, a couple more home games before you have a long stretch on the road end of this month into November.
All right, college hockey, and I'm going to try to get you going a little bit here. I'm going to be honest, Dan. And again, we're here on the Talk North podcast network. Go to talknorth.com. We'd love you to put your name and your business on our show. Jim Suhan will take good care of you. We'll get your name out there. We'll get you a ton of coverage. We'll tweet about it. We'll Facebook about it. We'll get it all out there for you. Get to talknorth.com. Find Jimmy Suhan and be a sponsor here on the Frozen Fantasy. Dan Myers, Kevin Gorg with you from Tria Rink. We're on a Friday here. And we're going to get to fantasy football shortly, but college hockey. Dan, I've been a fan all my life. I got to work for over near a decade at Fox Sports North covering the old WCHA.
And I have the pictorial proof, by the way, of you and Doug Woog.
We had weekend appointment TV with Wooger and Frank Mazzacco and the hair and all that good stuff.
That was so good.
Now, here's my problem. College hockey has lost guys like me that want to love it, love the game, and I look at last weekend. I am a huge Bob Motzko guy. One of the nicest guys in the game. Great coach.
Old school throwback college hockey coach.
Love the way he does his thing. I've got to know him over the years. New Gopher coach. I'm all fired up. They're playing the number 1 team in the country. They tie on Saturday night. They're coming home to play at Mariucci on Sunday. I just got done watching the Vikings take down the Super Bowl champs. I'm ready for college hockey. I click over to watch the game, and Mariucci is half full.
Yep.
Why? What has happened to your game?
Number 1 ranked team in the country. Defending national champion.
In-state
rival.
Come on.
This is 10 years ago, 15 years ago when we're talking, and, even the heyday of college hockey, probably less than that, 7, 8 years ago.
Right.
This was, I get 3 o'clock Vikings game aside. Schedule's not ideal on a Sunday. Weird start time.
It's their first game of the year.
10 years ago, Mariucci Arena is packed.
The scalpers are making money, and it's packed in Dinkytown.
And
it's half full, Dan.
And I threw it out on Twitter. Jeez. I was thinking the exact same thing. And I threw it out on Twitter last week just to see kind of what Gopher fans would come back with. And there are any number of excuses. The ticket prices are too high. The schedule's weird. Or a lot of folks are like you. They've completely given up on the bit. And it's unfortunate because I love college hockey. When I got into hockey, and I love hockey as much as anyone, you know that. We talk hockey constantly, all levels of it. And for me, it's personal because when I came up on hockey, the North Stars were gone. So I don't have that connection to the North Stars like folks like you have, or folks like my dad's age that have that. I came around hockey in the mid-'90s. So my pro hockey team, quote, pro hockey team in town was the Gophers. First ever game I went to was against Minnesota Duluth, Mariucci Arena. Brian Bonin's on the ice for the Gophers. The year he won the Hobie. I was as big a Gopher rube as you'll ever come across. And, you go to – I went to Minnesota State and, kind of get that following, and that's the team I follow now. And it's disappointing to me to see the state of college hockey, especially considering – looking at the teams now and the programs now in the state of Minnesota, they're all so good. How fun would it be if these teams were all in the same conference in that old WCHA?
Oh, my God.
And I know it's never coming back. Like, I get it. Don't at me on Twitter. I get it. It's not coming back. The Big Ten is what it is. But for those of us that, like you and I, that that were once huge fans of the whole spectrum of college hockey.
Yes.
I'm so intent now just on kind of I focus on my one team or a couple teams here in the state. It used to be open that sports page on Saturday morning. What did St. Cloud do last night? What did Duluth do last night?
Look at the box scores. Know the schedule.
What did BU and BC on the East Coast? These are the teams that are nationally ranked in front of us. What did they do last night? And now it's you
gotta work hard to be a college hockey fan. Now you've got to follow your one team like you do with the Mavs. You know their schedule. But for people that follow the Big Ten and locally here, Gopher fans, there are Thursday night games. There are Sunday night games.
It's
it used
impossible
to be Friday
to find.
and Saturday
Yep.
at 7 o'clock. It was appointment TV. For the most part, they were playing a team that was a rival. The teams you got to know, the teams you got to love or hate, that was a part of the WCHA. That's changed dramatically.
Well, and I think – people say, well, the Gophers aren't as good as they used to be, and that's a different argument. I think the Gophers, from a competitive standpoint, are still a very good team.
Every year.
But you look at now around college hockey, and Minnesota State is the winningest program since Mike Hastings took over there 6 years ago. Duluth has won 2 national championships. St. Cloud is a national contender every year. But Bemidji State hops up every now and then. But you look at all, 15, 20 years ago, these programs weren't on this level. They weren't getting players like Riley Tufte up at Duluth and the Palings at St. Cloud. I mean, they weren't getting these guys. They were all going to Minnesota. And I think a big part of it is, and I've heard from Gopher fans on this, is, like you said, it used to be Friday, Saturday nights. It's on MSC. It's on Fox Sports North. It's appointment viewing. All these parents would go to these youth hockey tournaments in Grand Rapids or in International Falls or in Duluth or wherever they're at, and they watch the kids. They bring them to the rink. The kids play. The kids go back to the hotel. You play knee hockey. I mean, I'm sure you remember all this stuff.
And the parents go watch college hockey and have a few cocktails.
And the games are on the TV, and that's just how it was. It was like that every weekend, all winter long. It was you knew where to find it. It was appointment television, and that's how the Gophers became this part of the fabric of the state, because every hockey-playing family watched the Gophers. They knew the players. They cheered for the team, and it's not like that anymore.
And it's ironic because the teams like Minnesota State Mankato, the teams like Bemidji State, even I'll throw in St. Cloud State, because I'm 51 years old and I saw the birth of these programs at the D1 level. Being with the Gophers, being in that conference, challenging Minnesota, having Big Brother there.
Yep.
All boats would rise. It's kind of like Tiger Woods. He cultivated a whole generation of young golfers that now make it hard for him to get back where he was dominating in majors. Well, the Gophers are that team. They're Tiger Woods. They were the Big Brother. They're no longer that dominant team. They're a very good team. But now you mentioned all the other teams in state that have all risen because of that challenge with Minnesota and because of that appointment TV back in the old WCHA, and now they're off on their own, and they're all very good, and Minnesota can't get back to that dominant place again. They'll be with them. They'll be in the mix. They can make a run. They can win a national championship as soon as this year under Bob Motzko, but it's no longer like it was.
Well, and I think it's only a matter of time, I think, for Minnesota. As much as it pains me to say this as a Mavericks rube, I think Bob Motzko, I don't think he's going to be long at the University of Minnesota just because of his age, and I think it's becoming more and more like a lot of other sports, kind of a young man's game.
I agree.
And you've got a guy in Marquette who had a pretty damn good year last year with Northern Michigan, who's
got some credibility here.
It's no secret. If he was, I think, 4 or 5 more years experience as a head coach, I think he's probably the guy with the Gophers right now.
Patolny.
But I believe, and I hope I'm not misquoting Bob Motzko. I believe he gets it. This isn't a 25-year gig for him. This is something that a challenge he wanted to take. It's something that he had to kind of do as a guy who is connected a little bit to this program. He's got a national championship here. I think if he's here, let's say, because I think he's 62.
Yeah, he's in his early 60s.
Let's say he's here for 10 years. I think he wins at least one national championship here. He's that good of a coach, and you combine it with the new facilities they have there and the talent they still get, even though they don't get everyone. I think he wins at least one national championship. But keeping with the Gophers here, and we can move on here in a minute. We talked about this before coming on the air. You want to talk about weird schedules, and we talked about the Wild schedule. You start off with an emotional series against Minnesota Duluth, a highlight-type weekend if you're a Gopher hockey fan.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, all right, sweet, college hockey's back. We got the number one team. We're coming off a 3-point weekend against the number one team in the country. Minnesota in the USCHO poll went from 13th to 5th this week. They had 3 first-place votes. I mean, they had a massive jump. And then you get into the schedule, and it's an exhibition this weekend against the U.S. national team.
When's their next real game?
And then next weekend, it's another exhibition against a Canadian team. And then the weekend after that, it's one game, and this will be a great game. This will be a fun one to be at it's not at T-Mobile, I don't think, but they're playing in Las Vegas against the University of North Dakota.
Which will be great, but that's like the 27th of...
October 27th, and it's one game. It's not a series. It's one game. And then the weekend after that, now we're into November 2nd and 3rd, home and home against Minnesota State, which will be a fantastic weekend. Probably 2 top 10 teams.
Wow.
But you're talking 2-3 games in an entire month.
Hard to really build a following up by doing that.
And I mean, when you're playing Minnesota State, and you joked about how they're probably not fretting over that, but when you've played 3 games in the span of 4 weekends, and now you've got to jump right into a schedule against a top 10 team, and then the weekend after that, it's at Wisconsin, so you got a rival, and finally, you're playing one conference schedule before, or one conference series before Thanksgiving. You're not getting into it, and for the folks out there that are pro Big Ten and saying give it time, the rivalries will develop. You're not playing conference. You're playing 2 conference series by Christmas.
That's tough.
The best part about college hockey, how it used to be with the old WCHA, you play 1 non-conference series, maybe 2, and you're into the meat of that conference schedule by Halloween. And it's a grind until the end of the year. And it's just for Gopher fans in the Big Ten, and if you're a Mavericks guy like myself, the University of Alaska is not moving the needle for me. It's... there's in the WCHA there are haves and there's have-nots, and half the league is in one and half the league's in the other. And it seems like unless you're in the NCHC, which is a grind every single weekend,
premier conference now,
it's just conference schedule. The fun part of the league is the non-conference year, and that's done by October.
So before we get to fantasy football, any games we should look for this weekend, being that a lot of us just aren't plugged into college hockey like you are, Dan, and maybe looking for something to do this weekend?
Well, there's some good matchups here around the state. We'll just run through it, and you can, if you have any opinions here. I know you're not completely as plugged in as you used to be, but Boston University is at Minnesota State. That should be a fun series. BU 8th in the country.
That should be a very good series.
Minnesota State number 11. They were 10th.
Smells like a split.
Smells like a split to me as well. Minnesota State went out to BU last year. BU team that had a couple NHL guys on, including Jordan Greenway, and swept Boston University out there at their home barn. So I know in talking to Mike Hastings a couple weeks ago, he's expecting a pretty motivated BU team to try and come back and get a little payback. That one has some split all over it. Again, Minnesota State was 10th. The Gophers jumped them with their big weekend last weekend. Minnesota State just getting into their schedule here this weekend. Minnesota Duluth, the 3rd-ranked team. They were number 1. Tie and a loss drops them to 3 in the polls. They are traveling to Houghton.
Ooh.
Have you been to Houghton before?
Yeah, it's fun. I really enjoyed my trip covering the Gophers down there.
Did you ever get there for a winter carnival? I hear that's the weekend
I never got to see the carnival, but the setting there, I was there for a couple of different fall series, like this time of year, October.
If you're going to travel there, this is the time to go.
It's a haul. It's an 8-hour drive.
And it'd be, I would assume, this weekend, if you are a UMD fan living in Duluth and you get to make that trek across northern Wisconsin, the leaves have got to be just fantastic. This is definitely the weekend to go. Bulldogs, Michigan Tech Huskies, Michigan Tech 19th in the country. So again, 2 nationally ranked teams. St. Cloud State's going west, way west. They play at Alaska. The Huskies 5th in the country.
Wow. They'll win.
I have a feel. Alaska's pesky.
It is.
Now, of all the, and I said the WCHA is haves and have-nots. Alaska is kind of in that have-nots group. They always give Minnesota State trouble. Always. Even in Mankato, they give them trouble. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna peg that as a split.
Wow.
I say Alaska gets 1.
I think St. Cloud wins both.
Well, you're a homer.
I like the Huskies.
I love Mike Gibbons.
I do too.
Former Eastview head coach down there. Bemidji State wrapping it up here, home and home with North Dakota. Always, Bemidji State plays.
They play teams tough. Sarah is a great coach.
North Dakota and Minnesota Duluth are their 2 primary rivals, and it always seems like they have success against those teams, especially Duluth. I think they have a winning record against Duluth over the last 6-7 years. I'll peg that. You know what? I'm going to take North Dakota for the sweep, but it's going to be like 2-1 games.
I think Bemidji gets one of those 2 games, and it should be fun.
Wouldn't be surprised.
College hockey's back. We'll kind of, Dan's our insider when it comes to the college puck. We'll get you insight throughout the Frozen Fantasy throughout the year. Now, the main base of the show, it is fantasy football, and it is Week 6. We've had our first game in the books last night. The Giants are